Hey, Angela.
Hey, Mary Alice. It is a pleasure to join you and to join Malaprops. Asheville is a city that my husband and I are in love with. So anytime we are in Asheville, we do like to stop in downtown and the bookstore. But it's been a long time. I've not been to Asheville in at least 2 years. So thanks, pandemic.
Well, we're
But
here in
Mary,
South Carolina. We're Carolina girls. We love North. I have a house in North Carolina, South Carolina. But our story takes place on a small island called Deweese in South Carolina, right off where I live now, an Isle of Palms. And we both love Deweese Island because it's a nature sanctuary, bird sanctuary, and just a wonderful place to unplug. So we're delighted to talk to you about it and talk to you about our book tonight, The Islanders.
yes, absolutely. Mary Alice, let's start first with how you branched into middle grade fiction because you have spent your entire career writing books in adult fiction. And then also you created two wonderful picture books. Um, I know that we started working together on this project 4 years ago, but I know a lot of people are always curious to know how did all of that happen? Talk about that to everyone.
Well, it was the picture books that sort of seeded everything. I loved when I had a lot of information when I work. For those of you who don't know my novels, I write books that are set against endangered species or some environmental issue that I know if it's concerning me, niggling at me, it might very well be niggling at you too. And I usually I'm pretty close to the timing of some event like the crash of the monarch butterflies when the butterfly's daughter came out. So it's somewhat instinctive. And I when I have extra material or information that I've worked on and I want to share it with kids, I've done picture books. So we have a butterfly called Hope and Turtle Summer. And these are picture books for children, for the very young. But when I went to the schools and I talked to the children, I was really intrigued by the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the middle grade group of kids, because number one, they're reading chapter books and they're more aware. But number two, these kids really believe they can change the world. They are energetic, enthusiastic, and self confident. And these are the stewards of tomorrow. And I thought, that's the kids I want to write for. But I had never done it. And I also have my adult novels that are the primary focus of my career. And it wasn't until years later when I wrote it was a novel called A Low Country Christmas. But one of the protagonists was a 10-year-old boy. Oops. my, the dogs, I'm with my dog. I live with animals, so y'all know that's just my life. And that voice bubbled out of me, this 10-year-old boy, Miller. I just loved writing his voice. So I got the hankering to say, maybe I can do this. Maybe I really can. And that's when I came to Angela. I was asked to write a middle grade series. And I came to Angela and I said, Angela, what do you think? And then, Angela, you pick up here.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I remember that day so clearly. Um, for all I know, I probably wrote it down in my own journal. I don't know, but it was such a big deal because for all the years that we've worked together, and I know that I've always enjoyed writing. My entire career has been built on writing, but just a different
Yeah,
form of it as a journalist.
yeah.
And so when you asked me if I would, I about fell out of my chair. It was an emotional request because you spoke out loud the wish in my heart, which was to
Mhm.
write children's books one day. But it really wasn't something I ever talked about to other people because at the time it seemed more like just a wish, a really far off dream. And I didn't know how to make that transition. So it was an easy yes when you asked me. And a humbling one too, because I know that I was getting ready to work on a project with someone who is definitely a veteran in this industry and in that craft, and I had to learn how to switch from telling stories from a journalism point of view, from like a media press release point of view, into a storytelling point of view. So
Mhm. And
it's
that
been
is a
really,
big shift. I mean,
it
that's a
is.
shift. I've talked to a lot of writers who are now writing fiction who used to write journalism. I actually started out studying journalism, and it truly is a shift in point of view and how to present story. It really is different. But I'll tell you one thing, Angela and I always knew, she's really talented. So there was no doubt in my mind the talent was there. And also the other thing that Angela and I have talked about whenever there is any collaboration, and collaborations work differently with different teams. It's always individual, but always there's trust involved. And we trusted each other. We knew that whatever we did we would do with our full heart and our integrity in place. And we trusted the talent was there too. And I think it became an enjoyable experience, don't you think, Angela?
I think so. There were a few times though I thought might not be so enjoyable for you. You know, when you get into the nitty gritty of revisions and
Oh,
everything,
there we
just it really was amazing to be a part of that process from beginning to end, because as I've worked with you for a decade and I've just watched you from the sidelines work on all of your novels and go through the revisions with your editor. I mean, that's a very um, intimate time. You're not really sharing that with everybody. So to
Mhm.
dive in and get that experience from beginning to end with you was really remarkable. And I feel like
Yeah.
the heart of our story has always been there from the very beginning,
Mhm.
from what we envisioned, but it blossomed and deepened and everything tied together more the longer we got to work on it, don't you think?
It's true. Let's talk about how we actually did it. So we got together. I had an idea when I was asked to write a middle grade series. What I the general idea of what interested me, and I know Angela, you did too. And what tied us together was that we both really felt strongly about Deweese Island, which was this unique place. For me, the message was largely wanting to get to unplug kids. I felt from my own experiences as a mother, I used to take my kids up to the farm in Vermont, which was unplugged completely. We couldn't get reception up there, and there was no internet back then. But it was watching kids being able to run wild in the mountains and explore. And the only requirement was they could come when they came back. We had to bring back something that they knew was different, a leaf, a plant, a bird call, something, and we would identify. That was one of the mainstays of all the summers we had there. But that sense of unplugging and identifying was a story I wanted to write, and I didn't know how yet. What about you, Angela? What was the main thing you wanted to say when you began writing?
I wanted to, I tried to envision my boys the whole time, and their
Mm-hmm.
friends, just to kind of keep it really personal. And I wanted the kids to get a sense of awe of being in this wild place, which for anybody who ever gets the rare opportunity to go to Dewey's, it really does feel like a whole nother world, maybe a step back in time to a type of idyllic neighborhood life that really doesn't exist in a lot of places. But I wanted my boys to really appreciate the nature around them, because in
Mm-hmm.
the low country, it is lush with a lot of wild species and wild plants, but it's so easy to just forget all that because of the technology at our fingertips. So that was
Mm-hmm.
really important to me, was just for them to experience that adventure in the wild with no other distractions, and hopefully that at the end of that story that you feel that sense of excitement bubbling up inside of you of wanting to go
Yeah.
out and find your own adventure.
Yeah. Well, let's tell the story really quickly. Um, just in a nutshell, this is the story of three children who are on a small remote island that's accessible only by boat. And on this island, there are no cars, no stores of any kind, no restaurants. And for these children, especially for the primary character, Jake, who went to stay with his grandmother, no internet. So
It's
Jake is a
no
military,
fun.
no fun. That's what they're thinking. Worst summer ever. Jake is the primary character, and he is he's 11. I always want to say 10, but in fact, we bumped him up to 11.
We're all 11.
And they're all just on the cusp of adolescence. And he is a military child, and both his parents are in the military. His father was injured in Afghanistan, and they don't know the extent of his injuries at the beginning of the book. And the mother is a C-17 pilot who says, I've got to be with your dad. You're going to spend the summer with Honey, who is his grandmother. So that's Jake. Then there's Macon. And Macon is an African-American boy from a wealthy family of lawyers in Atlanta, Georgia. And his mother's desperately trying to keep this baby in the oven. So she did what I've done twice in my life. She's in bed rest, and they went to the island to have a quiet lifestyle. Father's in Atlanta. Macon is the man of the house. And then there's Honey, who's the little same age girl who's kind of a know-it-all.
Lovey.
She knows nature.
Lovey.
Did I say Honey? Lovey.
You did.
Thank you. Lovey. And she's actually a character from one of my earlier books in the beach house. She was actually born in the beach house. And she's same age, but she takes her little boat and boats over across the little inlet to Deweese from Isle of Palms to stay with her aunt during the summer while her mama is working. And so these three children, who might not be friends ordinarily, are on Deweese Island, and they kind of hang out together, and they all have their secrets, what their inner thoughts and fears and shame is. But as the summer progresses, they hang out and they become friends, and they start to explore together. They get into a little trouble, and they get a little community service, which is, of course, sea turtles. Of course, we had to get turtles in there. And so your kids will learn about sea turtle nests in this book.
And other wildlife, too.
And other wildlife. And I think at the end, though, when summer comes to a conclusion, you have three kids who realize that being on the island was the best summer ever.
And Mary Alice, you and I went back and forth a little bit in the very beginning, trying to figure out, okay, we know our characters, we know where we want the story to go, but what point of view were we going to choose?
Yes, that's always a difficult one.
Yeah. Are you happy that we chose first person point of view and used Jake, our 11-year-old military kid?
I am. I really think first person works for middle grade. Kids can identify with the kids, with their, the child they're reading about. But I wasn't sure, as you know, afterwards I was thinking, ooh, maybe we should have had first point of view from each character, from Jake, from Macon, from Lovey. Instead, we decided to swing it mostly towards Jake, because as the story evolved, we started looking deeper into what the story was about, the issues that are so important. And in this story, it was the father-son relationship. The little boy wondering, what's up with my dad? Is he well? And when he finds out his father loses his leg, that story question deepens to, the man doesn't have a leg. Is he still my dad? Angela, why don't you talk about some of the other really, I think, important issues that were brought up in this book?
Mm-hmm. Well, the reader learns early on in the story that not only is Jake dealing with grief and worry about his father and being disconnected from his family and leaving New Jersey where he had been living, but you see early on that his grandmother, Honey, is dealing with depression. Very common thing, but something that isn't always talked about in our everyday lives. And I really am glad that we touched upon that, because readers will see that Honey she was already depressed before Jake arrives, but the circumstances that send him to the island and the news that they discover exacerbate that. And so you see those two having to work through it and together. And that's
really beautiful. That relationship evolves so beautifully, because nature is such a healing power in this book. But the grandmother-grandchild relationship was also very mutually healing in this book.
I love seeing the lesson in there that we each help each other in life, no matter the age, that a
Yeah.
child is there to help an older family member and vice versa. They really were there for each other. But you had mentioned that another thing that was covered is shame. Like when you're
Mhm.
growing up, we all have, most of us have this point in life as we try to make friends where you want to be accepted, you want a friend. And so maybe being different feels scary. And so we
Mhm.
address that for each child. Each person has their own hidden insecurity.
Mhm.
And slowly over time, those insecurities eventually are revealed. And we see, how does each person really respond to those differences? And through all of that, I think they also develop a deep understanding of what true friendship is. But they have
And
guides along the way to help with that, I think, don't
I
you?
think one of the important points, and you touched on them, of this whole discussion is in middle grade fiction, there are a wide variety of serious topics that are covered across the board, no matter what genre. Middle grade fiction is not a genre. It is basically age specific, usually 8 to 12. That's roughly what we look at. And people might think, oh, it's just all sweet stories. But in fact, really great middle grade fiction touches on some pretty tough issues. And as Angela just talked about, we have them in this book, but it's not young adults. So if your child is a precocious reader, an advanced reader, and she's only 10 years old, that doesn't mean she's ready for young adult, which is 12 to 18 years of age. And it's because content differs. There is not, I was always joking, there's no sex, rock, and roll in middle grade fiction. It's Harry Potter is a good example. I was talking about this the other day on Friends in Fiction when we brought it up. The early stories of J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter were definitely middle grade fiction with young kids going to school, having serious issues. But when they got to darker issues and sexual overtones, that moved it into young adult in bookstores and libraries and schools. So I think for the parents out there who are the gatekeepers for your kids, that is usually content, age specific content, is what really particularly marks middle grade from young adult. And we are clearly in middle grade, and we don't shy away from tough issues. We believe in, we really worked hard for diversity, but we looked at depression, we looked at shame, oh my good, economic differences, inner fears, am I worth it? Just am I good enough? That kind of fear. There were issues for Macon about not being able to swim, which is cultural. And I think we touched on it, but in middle grade, it's how you couch it, how you present it, and also vocabulary that is sensitive to this age group.
Right. And I do wholeheartedly believe that even though this book is written and marketed to readers of a certain age, 8 to 12, it is truly a book that can be enjoyed by anyone age 8 and up. I like to say, what, 88 and beyond.
I agree. I agree. And because Angela and I were talking the other day, and what is your favorite middle grade book? And I know I can tell you right now, mine is The Secret Garden. And it sparked my love of nature, of course, but it was, and the story. But even today, as an adult, I look back at that book and I love it. So and I loved, we read, Angela, how many books did we read while we were preparing for this book? I mean,
Gosh.
dozens.
Yeah, I
They
was
were
going to say at least 20.
such great reads, such
Yeah.
great reads
And a
as an
wide
adult.
variety. Like there's, I
Mhm.
mean, it covers everything under the sun in middle grade, which is so much fun.
In fact, if you read the book, there's a section when Jake is well, let me tell you, he goes to the house, and Honey's house is a wonderful thing. She calls it the bird's nest. And it looks like a giant tree house. And in the South, if you're not from the South, if you're on the island, because of tidal surges, you have to have your house built on pilings, because of the water. So she doesn't have an elevator. You got to climb up the steps to get there. But when you walk inside, and we know this house because both of us were in this house, it's a lot of windows. And around the windows, you see all the trees, and you feel like you're in the trees, like a tree house. But the bedroom, you have to climb up this ladder to the loft. And that loft was his daddy's bedroom when he grew up. So here's Jake, who's missing his dad, and he's looking around, and there are his father's treasures. Honey never changed anything. So not only does he have things on the shelves like army characters and shells, but his library's there. His dad was a reader. So we had
that was
I'm
fun
sorry,
spotlighting
my
books
favorite,
within
yes,
our
Swiss,
book.
there
My
was
Side of the
cats,
Mountain,
My Side of the Mountain, Swiss Family Robinson, Robinson Crusoe,
one of your favorite
Hatchet,
classics, Heidi,
Hat,
which I had never read.
Heidi.
Remember when we were writing this, you were like, you have to read Heidi. I mean, she straight up ordered me a copy right then and there and said, it'll be here in a few days and you must read it. And she was right. It was an incredible book about
Yeah.
a grandparent and child relationship too. So I think we have a little bit of inspiration from all that.
But that's our favorite books we put in the library. So if anyone here wants to know what some great outdoor books are, just check out the bookshelf in the island.
We have to start thinking about the other books we're going to pepper in for book 2 when we write it.
Like oh, yes. I know Cy Montgomery's books are going to be in there.
She's fascinating. If you don't know her, look her up after this program. Mary Alice, one of the things I really love about the book is just how much of a character the island itself is. So while we talk about big issues, important issues to children of that age, it's still a fun, uplifting, exciting adventure. And that's what I really love, Mary Alice, is how we included so many animals and so many different scenes that are very true to life if you were living on that island today.
And let me invite everybody to go to 2 places. One, go to my website. There's a page for Deweese, and on that page it says Visit Deweese. And there is 2 things. One is Judy Drew Fairchild, who was our go-to person for research, who lives on the island. She's a wonderful naturalist, and she created from the lines in the book, photographs to accompany it, like with little music, so you can actually see what the boys endured or experienced when they reached Deweese. But also she has a wonderful Instagram program called Nature Walks with Judy. And you can catch that on my website too, or just go to Instagram. It's like hearing your favorite 3rd grade teacher describe why that critter is so cool. You just want to know all about it. So I
learned something every video she posts, don't you?
I do too. And that's what we want. We want kids not to have to learn, but to want to learn, to make it fun.
Mm-hmm. And you do that really well in your adult fiction. I've heard you say many times that when people read your books, you do not want to make the reader feel like they're getting beat over the head with facts.
No, that's not the purpose of fiction. You want them to be entertained. And I think we did it with the kids too. It was slipped into their adventures. It wasn't like today we're going to learn about. It was part of their adventure, which brings me to the point, Angela, talk about the journals and why that's so important and why we hope other kids will keep them too.
So we use the journal in the book, 2 kinds. So first is Jake, our 11-year-old protagonist, receives from his grandmother his father's old journal, and she gives him homework. She says, okay, when your father was a kid on this island, every day he would go out and use this nature journal to document the plants and animals around him and his experiences. So Jake is assigned summer homework to do, again, making it be the worst summer ever. Can you hear the moaning and groaning right now?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so Jake tries to emulate that. And he's working at it. He struggles a bit, but he gets an idea because he's missing his father so much. And he doesn't like the way that his nature journal is sounding. And he's like, oh, I just can't do this. And he ends up writing to his father, writing letters to his father throughout the book.
That was a really great point.
And it's a wonderful way for Jake to share with the reader what his true experiences are. And he weaves in fun facts, but also his insights and his experiences and thoughts and fears with nature and with his friends. Mary Alice, I think you flagged a really great scene in the book that captures that. Do you mind reading that to everybody?
I do. I will. And I think it was a really great turning point for it was, even though it's fairly early in the book, when we wanted to have a journal, but how to make it meaningful for kids. And I think this really worked. So here's Jake lying in his bed, surrounded by his dad's things. And there's this big hidey window because, oh my gosh, one day I'm going to get one. I really want one. And he looks out the window and he sees the trees, but he's missing his dad. And he's thinking about the journal of his dad's that he's been reading all day and his dad's feelings. And why can't I write my feelings? In my dad's journal, he wrote when he felt lonely or happy. He described things he did with his pal, Red. Reading his words, I felt like he was talking to me, like I knew him better. When I looked at what I wrote, it seemed so, school-like. I went to the nature center. I got water. The cart broke down. I was telling facts, not sharing my feelings. I scratched out the words. How could I make my words mean something? How could I write like my dad? Then the idea hit me. I could write to my dad. I tore a fresh page out of the notebook, smoothed it on my desk, took a deep breath, and imagined my dad's face, the way he smiled. Smiling back, I began to write. Dear Dad, I miss you. Mom, too. A lot. Honey gave me summer homework. Can you believe that? At first I was mad, but it turned out to be okay. She gave me a notebook and told me it was my journal. I had to draw and write in it all about the things I saw and did on the island, just like you did when you were a kid. Honey gave me your old journal. I hope that's okay with you. I'm reading it and it's really good. I like hearing what you had to say. It makes me feel like you're here, talking to me. Today, I tried to draw these huge white birds I saw in the lagoon. They had scaly heads that reminded me of dinosaurs, or maybe even a dragon. Can you guess the creature? A wood stork. But Dad, it's weird here with no Wi-Fi or a cell phone. Don't ask. Not even decent TV. How did you stand it? I met two kids here. I was worried I'd be the only one on the island. They're both about my age. Macon's from Atlanta. He's real smart and big. I think he's rich too. Then there's Lovey. She lives on the Isle of Palms. She drives a boat over here all by herself. I gotta learn how to do that too. Honey said all I must do is pass the test. But guess what? I know how to drive a golf cart. That's about it. Tell Mom to call. Honey's worried about you. She tries to act normal, but I can tell it's fake. I know how she feels. I'm worried too. I love you, Dad. Your son, Jake. And that's his letter. And the rest, we have little snippets of letters throughout the novel, but mostly it's
in the novel,
an adventure.
Right. And in the novel, I love how the illustrator added artwork to support
Very
some
important.
Of the journal entries. Like it is, if you love the cover, just wait till you see the inside. It's amazing. Don't you love it, Mary?
Come on, those are really cute turtles. I'm really worried when I see people draw turtles because sometimes they're just really awful. And I honestly, but these are age appropriate. And you see the kids in the background getting so excited because the turtles are actually hatchlings that are on the way to the beach. And one of the subplots in the story is that the kids actually discover a nest, and the nest was predated by coyotes. which is a big issue on the island. So these kids are like, whoa, mission, save the nest. And they have this whole adventure of trying to save the nest. And at the end, when the nest hatches, it's like their nest. And it's that sense of ownership and pride that is so great. Your
They learn
kids.
to take care, like you teach in a lot of your books.
Yes. Yeah.
What's your favorite scene out of all of them? Do you have one without making too many spoilers?
I think actually one of my very favorite scenes was the one I just read, because it was a turning point for Jake, who really was missing his dad and surrounded by all this stuff. I love the internal pathos so much. And this is when this boy is trying to, he loves his grandmother, but he's out of place. He doesn't feel comfortable on the island. And so it's that first initial connection with his dad, which only grows and grows and grows till the very end. And that moment when he sees his father again, that is a climactic moment that it was a great joy to write.
That was really
How about you, Angela? Your favorite scene?
One of my favorite scenes, I have a few, but I'll just share one, is when Jake truly meets and speaks with Macon, the other boy on the island, because it's a scene where that starts off with Jake being alone and everything's going really wrong as he's trying to explore the island and do what his grandmother tells him. And all of a sudden, his senses get heightened because he feels like he's being followed. Well, on Dewey's Island, in real life and in fiction, there is a big old gator, and his name is Big Al. And Big Al must be respected, as should all nature. He's a little worried about Big Al because Honey's told him all about all kinds of wild animals. And he's like, is that an alligator? Maybe it's a bear. Do bears even live out here? He doesn't even know. But it's a really wonderful way for them to interact. I liked the banter between both of the kids once they do meet, because they're very different from each other, but they jive too really well.
I agree. That was a really fun scene. And then, of course, when Jake sees Lovey ride the boat by herself, she's like, what? How can that be? How can she do that? She's my age. So that sense of kids being competitive a little bit, and Jake not knowing what his strengths were. Macon was smart and he knew a lot of cool facts, and Lovey knew all about nature. But I don't know about you, Angela, but I always saw our Jake as a leader, a natural born leader, but he wasn't sure and confident of his own abilities yet, especially this summer. But you see that confidence grow, and the other kids see it in him, but he doesn't yet see it in himself.
And isn't that so true in real life? Our friends see the goodness in us first, sometimes before we truly realize it ourselves.
So let's talk a bit about the next book that's coming too. Just give a hint. There will be another book, everybody, coming out in summer of 2022. Gosh, seems so far away, but it'll be here before you know it. So let's talk a little.
I know kids are already enjoying the book, and adults too. And I'm just like, oh, I wish I could wave a magic wand and like
make it happen.
Our thoughts be in a book now. Because you and I know how quickly kids devour books once they find something that clicks with them that they enjoy reading, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I am excited about tell everybody about our next big spotlighted animal.
It's Big Al, because in truth, alligators are in trouble out there. They really are. I've been wanting to write a book about alligators forever, and this just is perfect because we already have this true alligator, Big Al, who's like a 13-foot long alligator. And on Dewey's, there are a number of alligators, and the big bulls are, becoming endangered. So we're concerned about them, but it'll be an adventure for the kids, and some not so cool kids arrive on the island next summer, and how do they all deal? So it'll be a lot of fun. And then, of course, more importantly, the big story question continues of the father-son relationship. Now that they're together, father is returning to the island, and he's dealing with a new self, different abilities, and some PTSD. So I think that'll be really important.
And I got to throw in the fact that there'll also be a little bit of a hunt throughout the story too for some treasures, perhaps.
Yes,
So
yes.
we're gonna tap into some of the history and mystery of Dewey's Island as well. I'm so excited about that, Mary Alice.
One of the things that I'm excited about this whole project is this book is really strong for any librarians or teachers out there, even for parents who are homeschooling. We really had a mind to the cross curriculum. It covers science, it covers obviously English and reading, it covers journals, which is writing, and even social studies as they discuss climate change and just awareness of our place on the planet. So for those of you who are looking for reading material that covers those areas for third, fourth, fifth grade, this is a book you might want to consider. We were really quite mindful of it. And on my website, you will see curriculum materials already developed by Simon & Schuster for teachers to use and for librarians and for homeschooling. I just wanted to toss that out there because I know there are a lot of people who also perhaps you're not satisfied with the education about climate change out there and you're concerned. I know in Asheville it's a big important part, and this is a book you might want to read with your child and perhaps even start that journal. And the journal is not a diary kind of journal. It's a journal that could be a composition notebook that you buy 50 cents when back to school supplies are coming out. The composition notebook. And I take my grandchildren out and we pick the flowers or leaves that they don't know. We come home and we Google it because that's our Encyclopedia Britannica today. And we identify it. So he colors it, draws it, writes the name of it. And that's really enough, and how he feels about it. I like the flower. If that's all the child can write, it's good enough. Or I found the flower on the 2nd Avenue beach path. That's a little bit more words for an older child, but a little bit of description and where it was found. This is helpful not only to the child, but I suspect there are a number of parents who might not know the names of all these things too. Think of the fun you'll have learning with your child, because once you know the names, whether it's the forest, the woods, the beach, your own backyard, it's home. You know what to be afraid of, what is venomous, and what is not. You're at home in the wild.
That is so true. And I hope that people feel at home in the wild of Dewey's Island when they read our book, Mary Alice. It
I
truly
do too.
was such a joy to work on this passion project of ours. We
Mhm.
dedicated this book to you, dedicated it to all your grandchildren, and I dedicated it to my boys. And so I know the kids will love it. Are you ready to take questions from
I
the
sure am.
audience?
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, I think Stephanie's going to pop back in.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi. It's been great listening to y'all talk about the book and how it came to be. Thanks for sharing everything with us this evening. I'll just we talked about this a little bit before we came on for the audience, and so I'll just say again how much I appreciate your sort of consistent commitment to nature and to conserving nature, and also to wanting to excite children about that as well.
Thank you.
I just, everything you said at the beginning about, having hope that children
Thank you.
will sort of safeguard our natural world. And of course, we need it for us, right, to survive, but also nature is, it deserves to exist in its own right on its, in its own terms as
Yes.
well. And so, getting children involved, is of course what we need to do. So I just
They
think
are the
that's
stewards
wonderful.
of tomorrow. I mean, this is
Absolutely.
the planet we're handing. And who was it? The other night we were having a conversation with Cy Montgomery, who's a wonderful author.
And thank you for
children.
mentioning Cy Montgomery. Patricia posted in the chat that we love Cy Montgomery, and we do. So we encourage
she's
everyone
great.
to pick up Cy's books. Yeah.
She writes nonfiction, but it's so lyrical and so beautiful.
Yeah.
And when I commented that the children are the stewards of tomorrow, she actually said, no, children are the stewards of today. They're out there doing the work right
Absolutely.
now.
That's
That makes
true.
me so proud.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll just go ahead and plug directly Soul of an Octopus, which which is an amazing, just an amazing book. And I also want to say specifically that how excited I am about the next book. I'm from Florida originally. I've lived in Wisconsin for, and so, and I have a soft spot for alligators. I think they get a bad rap.
They do.
And they are necessary to ecosystems, and they are living dinosaurs with us today.
Absolutely.
They're remarkable, amazing.
And I think if we all just remember, we tend to all think in the Western world that this is our planet and we dominate it, but in fact, it's a shared planet.
Absolutely.
And as we are all moving to the south and loving the southern landscape, we are encroaching on what is their home. Yeah. So they are not doing anything that they don't ordinarily, they're not doing it against. Eating a dog, for example, is a horrible thing. I have little dogs, but I think there's a certain shared responsibility. And what's happening out there is they're killing the bulls, and that is eradicating the population. And so it's just learning to balance, to learn together, learn to live together. And that's what we're hoping to show with Big Al, that if you leave him alone, he's okay. He knows how to live his life and eat appropriate food. He's not after us. But it's when you start picking on him, you might get in trouble.
Sure. Yeah. It is. Yeah. It is. It's about the balance, and really looking forward to that.
Thank you.
I'm curious to get your opinion, Stephanie, when we write that too.
I'm looking. My ears. It's not about me this evening, but my ears just completely perked up at the alligator storyline. It's so I am really looking forward to that. I think that's wonderful, because that is, and that choice. I think baby sea turtles are like an easier, are easier for folks to identify with. Maybe than with alligators, right? And so that's
not
a great
touchy-feely.
choice. Exactly right. Alligators aren't cuddly.
No, they have big pointed teeth. And like we started out with Hook, he's going to eat Hook. And Peter Pan, and they are dangerous.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think anybody will doubt that they're dangerous. It's like when you look at snakes too, any kind of reptiles generally have a bad rap out there. And I think Sai was actually talking about she was in a pit with 18,000 snakes, and everyone started to cringe. And the point is that if you notice, and that's why up in North Carolina, where you are, Stephanie, there are a lot of snakes, and you just have to know what's what. What's venomous and what's not. And most snakes want to stay clear of human beings. And most snakes are actually beneficial. If you have a black racer snake in your attic, chances are you're not going to have any mice up there. Exactly. Hey, Angela, I think maybe we should put a black racer snake in the attic.
I think that's a great idea.
Make it a pro reptile series.
The list
Turtles,
of species
snakes,
we can put in the
alligators.
But remember, I hope we can squeeze in my favorite that I want to get into the story.
Oh yes, tell them your favorite.
I'm hoping we'll get river otters in there as well.
Now that's touchy-feely.
And that's back to the cuddly factor for sure. Although
they are cute, but
they're predators.
They're pretty ferocious.
They're ferocious.
Yeah, you don't want to get close to them. Yeah, they look really cute.
Yeah, they're very furry and cuddly looking, but what I've read about river otters suggests that you don't want to.
Well, here's one of the great things about writing this book for middle grade, or writing any book for children, is that we get to use the power of storytelling to help all of us learn a little bit more about these species. And when you take that fear factor away through fun, memorable stories, then all of us can do a better job being, better caretakers of the land and the animals around us, right?
And just developing a healthy respect for nature, and remembering that we're not actually separate from nature. No matter how many layers of concrete or asphalt we might think are between us, we're still part of the the world that we live in. And
what I think is so interesting about the conversation we're having right now, we're three adults who love books and we love animals and nature. And yet when my grandkids were here this weekend, it was still like, they are resistant about reading. A lot of kids in general. How do you get them to pick up a book and read it? It has to be fun. I mean, it has to be something that they think is grabs you right at the beginning. They like the characters. There's some action in it.
Yeah.
And they're going to be kids who have their own particular kind of book they want to read. My feeling is get them that book.
Yeah.
Get them, find out what they love to read and get that book for them. There's a wide variety of books. But I was really excited. My grandson, Jack, who kind of close to Jake, he was my first editor. And he looked at the first draft a couple of years ago, actually. He barely remembered it, Angela. It was so long ago, short-term memory, those kids. And I showed it to him and he thought it started slow. Like it was a little, I think the word he used was boring, which is the word you never want to hear as an author.
So that's why we love kids' honesty.
Kids are super honest.
I mean, and I took it to heart and we ripped it apart, hyped up the pacing, started again fresh. He likes it now. But that sense of this is supposed to be fun for kids. Every book they read has to capture that imagination. And Angela made a point the other day that I thought I want to repeat here, that a lot of kids read fantasy books at this age.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get them hooked into what's going on in the wild, that's as good as any fantasy. I challenge you. Because, Big Al with his pointed teeth, or the coyotes coming after you at night. You're worried, you're hiding in your tents or your screened-in porch and the coyotes are out there. That's exciting stuff. And it could be a dragon or it could be a coyote, but coyotes are real. And that makes it kind of super cool.
Yeah, yeah. So let's actually move on to questions back to The Islanders, the book. Brenda is asking, and the book actually does a lot, which is great. Brenda's asking if there is a central message, or like is there something in particular at the heart of the novel for you, Mary Alice, that the thing that you really want people to take away?
Yeah, for me, clearly, it's as I said, it is to unplug your kids. And I know that's a large ask, but each of us have to decide what that means in our own families, whether it's a day a week or a couple hours a day. Make it work for your family, but unplug them and model. You can't be looking at your phone and telling your kids not to connect, but unplug, get outside, past the glass wall, into the fresh air, feel the sun on your face, and start in small increments and just explore start in your own backyard. What's out there? Let's name what's in our own backyard. That's my goal, is to get adults and kids together outside and connecting.
What about you, Angela?
For me, I've always wanted readers to understand that there is magic all around them in the world of nature. And when you're out there, you'll also discover the magic that's within you as well. And I think that's really important to readers of any age, but especially the middle grade, is that it's right there. You've got it. But you have to take time to disconnect from the busyness and noise of life and go reconnect with Mother Nature to find it.
Yeah. And I know, at least here in Asheville, and I know in other places as well, you can connect with, some kids don't have backyards, for instance, right? And so you can
parks.
you can connect with parks, or find organizations that, take kids out into nature, and to kind of have that opportunity to get in touch with the natural world if it's not, not part of your everyday experience. And
it's so healthy.
Edifying. Yeah.
It's so healthy to learn how to fish. I mean, my gosh, Asheville area is rich with wonderful fishing rivers and great hiking trails. I mean, I can name 5 or 6 places I'd take my kids tomorrow up in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And get out and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you waiting for?
And we're fortunate to have, lots of, you usually don't have to go very far.
Yeah.
To get out into nature. So another question I have for you is about your process, which you spoke a little bit about, I think Angela, you were mentioning sort of like when you got to the revision stage, but I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how the two of you worked together on this book, and specific, with a more sort of day-to-day picture, or like how the back and forth worked, and how you sort of timed things out and collaborated.
Well, I know that it changed over the course of the year as we found our strengths, and it'll be easier, I think, the second time, because now we kind of know what to expect for the second one. For the first one, though, I think, and for the second one, the really tight outline is important, what the story's about, and not just in synopsis form, but I think Angela and I are going to go away in July, and we're going to try and really nail down even tighter, even chapter by chapter. And then the writing just begins, tossing chapters back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until we get that first draft. And after we get what I call a pretty clean first draft, well, editing, pacing, I'll do my best to put my tool belt together and work on it. And Angela, of course, will have too. Then we're going to send it to our editor. And after that, we both get the revision letter. And revision letters are never fun to get, but I'm kind of an oddball. I love revisions. It's like, okay, it's like the Matrix. I can see it all. Okay, I'll move it like this. That's for me fun. So I look forward to hearing from the editor. And we have a really great editor in Allison Heller at Aladdin Books. And she will, make suggestions. And most of them we take, but not all of them. One of the things they wanted to cut out of The Islanders was the Heidi references with the Heidi window. And I went, oh no, that ain't going to happen. I love Heidi, and Angela's read Heidi and agreed 100%. So it's always our name on the book, but we do listen to our editor because that's her experience speaking. So this all takes a year, to finish.
Thankfully, we have a ton of notes from our last book writing process. We both personally love Dewey's Island, and where we live, it's not far for us to get there and return, just to get our feet back on the sand and ride a golf cart on the trails. Because the great thing about Dewey's Island, as we said in the beginning, no roads, which means you can only travel on foot, bicycle, or golf cart, which is totally fun.
Yeah.
And we're going to go, and basically Angela has 2 kids, which actually was a real benefit for the writing of the book, because her kids are middle grade kids. So she has that firsthand experience about putting language and things together that was more what I call authentic. But I don't have that issue. So I'm just going to stay on the house. I get to stay in the house for the week, and Angela's going to come back and forth as she can. And we're going to really fine tune this book so that we know what we want to say. Like Angela said, we have sections already done. And I think this will be much quicker than 4 years. It'll be more like 4 months.
But I think we needed, it was such a blessing to get that 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think it created a really strong framework, and to set up this series, solidly. And we know our characters so well now. So
we had to read 24 books, Angela. Well, all the middle grade fiction we read in preparation.
Hey, I'm not complaining. If you would have asked me as a kid, do you think you could ever get a job that actually tells you to keep reading more books? I would have been like, what? Really? Sign me up. So I'm glad to have that assignment.
I love middle grade fiction. There are so many great middle grade fiction books out there.
That's actually a wonderful point to end on. If either of you, both of you, would like to maybe make 1 or 2, quick recommendations of ones that jump out as the ones that are, you need to read, you and your kids, all, the whole family needs to read these middle grade books. And it could be the ones that you read researching, or maybe something else that you've read researching.
I can just name, I mean, there's so many, but let me just name a couple
Yeah.
that I think if you have kids like I do, who are boys and girls with different interests, boys like sports, they tend to read that. I would recommend Crossover by Kwame Alexander, which is
Kwame
hip hop.
Alexander's
So
nice.
cool. God,
Yeah.
I love him. And I think probably one of the best books I've read, adult or children books, in the last couple of years was The One and Only Ivan, and then The One and Only Bob. Was it The One and Only Bob, but the Bob is in the second title, the sequel. I think Applegate wrote incredibly powerful, almost poetry in that series. I loved Pat's Sarah Pennypacker, which was really great. Rebecca Stead writes a really great kind of, if your kid is city bound and wants to read like a mystery, kind of otherworldly kind of thing, I think anything by Rebecca Stead is really great too. And of course, we mentioned Cy Montgomery for nonfiction.
Excellent. Thank
For
you.
me, I'm going to throw in two classic authors. I'm going to say Judy Blume first, because I grew up loving her books. And what's been really fun for me is both of my boys have really enjoyed some of the Judy Blume books as well. So they are all in with, the Peter and Fudge series. And it's so fun to relive that, the things that, made you laugh as a kid, and then to see that happen. And then also Gary Paulson, Hatchet. And he had a new book come out recently that I'm dying to read. And then as far as contemporary writers, I really adore Erin Entrada Kelly. She does a great job writing diverse characters. She really does well capturing like the cultural diversity in different children's families. And I love how she also pays homage to Filipino folklore in some of her books. And so I'll read anything she writes. There's another guy, Kwame Mabalia. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina. He's a debut author, but he wrote the Tristan Strong series, and it's a fantastical world, but based on African folklore, and it's really great. So he brings in like Briar Rabbit and all these other characters that you've heard as American kids, but to like see it from an African folklore point of view is incredible. So those are some of my recommendations.
Wonderful.
Like I said, great books.
Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot of wonderful literature for young readers, for middle grade readers, yeah, it's a great time that way. And thank you so much for
and the Islanders. We hope you like it.
Of course, yes.
Let me pull it up here.
Thank you. Yeah, and it is a great cover. And who's the illustrator? Okay.
We've not met the illustrator yet.
Oh, okay.
But we want to.
And I
have to say,
big time because the art.
Really, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I meant to look at it. I just was looking at the cover and I was like, oh, we should go with the illustrator.
Jennifer Bricking.
Jennifer Bricking.
Jennifer Bricking, because I'll be honest with you, I've written 27 books, and a lot of the times they show you the book cover and you're like, no, did they even read the book? Honestly. And I was like, okay, my first middle grade cover, and they showed me this, and I just thought, oh gosh, the glare, but I just thought that's great. You know what else, Stephanie, that I thought was cool? In adult novels, when you get to the back, it's all covered with print. But for middle grade, look at that.
Yeah, it's a whole scene.
Gorgeous. It's like a scenario. And Kwame Alexander, speaking of Kwame, does have a cover quote coming up.
Yes, yeah, I saw that when I was looking at the book earlier, and I think that's high praise. So congratulations.
Thank you.
For Kwame Alexander to recommend the book, because
I was pretty excited about
he's really great at writing for young readers, and
he gets them.
Absolutely. So.
He's larger than life. So if anyone, I think if your kids haven't read Kwame Alexander, they should. He writes poetry too. So cool.
Right. Which is one of the reasons why his fiction is so amazing too. He's a poet, with that sensibility. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
again
you.
for speaking with us this evening. I want to thank everyone who has been with us in the audience, and folks who might be watching later, watching the video later. We just appreciate you spending time with us, appreciate you supporting Malaprops and other independent booksellers. We encourage you to pick up a copy of The Islanders by Mary Alice Monroe and Angela May, and keep an eye out for that next book with the alligators. Yeah.
Right. So get hooked this summer.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Thank
you know what,
Stephanie.
Stephanie, hopefully we'll be able to come to your store in person.
Absolutely, yes. I was actually just thinking the same thing. It seems like that is in the cards for sure. So I look forward to
Thank
that
you.
as well.
So fun.
Yeah, we can gather in the store and talk about it. Thank
you so much.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone.
All right.
Please stay safe and well, and we look forward to seeing y'all the next time. Good night.
Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Happy reading.
Mhm.